family-owned business that has existed in an industry that is as cyclical as the energy industry. That company has survived, thrived, and is growing over a period of 80 years. Kevin Kershisnik from Riverton is going to talk about entrepreneurship and what it takes to have it happen. And then Betsy Markey from, again, I'll introduce them later, but she will talk about what she has seen in other states that have endured some of the cyclical challenges that Wyoming's economy does. And finally, Senator Ross will talk about public policy in general and how the legislature has and needs to think about the cyclical economic challenges that we face. So with that as an intro, I'd like Ann to come forward, and she will discuss a number of dimensions of the economy using some PowerPoints that we put together cooperatively. Yeah. Ann, probably most of you know her and have seen her in similar settings before. She is a factotum about the Wyoming economy, and she's obviously a PhD economist at the university, and also Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, also Associate Provost, I should say, and someone I believe I can claim the honor of having presided over her coming into Old Main at the university, and was that ever a good move? So Ann, I'm going to turn this over to you as soon as I'm sure that, yes, it's working.
So pretty. Okay.
All right.
Let's go back one.
Okay, well, actually, if you press it forward, each of the successive slides will show up on that particular, graphs will show up on that slide.
Okay.
Like, oh, that.
Excuse us for the technical discussion here real quick.
This is only briefly rehearsed, but I...
Very briefly. Oh my goodness gracious. Hang on just 1 second. I'm going to push it back. There we go. So many of you have heard this from me in the recent past. A lot of you have been at other events where I've basically done this exact same thing, but what Bill and Dick and I were thinking was that a good thing to do when you're talking about the ABCs of an economy is to lay out the basic facts. And I'm an economist, so that means I am paid to be depressing all the time, so I will be depressing. These other fine people are going to cheer you back up, though, so don't worry about that. But this is an important conversation for us to have because for the past several months, and maybe even going back for the past couple of years, there's been so much uncertainty and so many shifting sands under our feet. And the very first thing that you do as a human, neuroscience says, when there's crazy uncertainty coming at you is that your amygdala turns on. And I don't know if any of you know your amygdala really well, but it's the place that says you either run or you fight. And that can turn into a circular firing squad sometimes. So what we need is basic common language here. So that's what I'm here to do, and then these fine people will cheer you up. So don't shoot the messenger, that's all I am. But this is, and this data is from the Energy Information Agency as well as the Wyoming Economic Analysis Division. So just to kind of give you some of the most recent numbers for our one of our largest sectors, which is the extractive industries, and particularly crude natural gas and coal. So those are the price trajectories we've been seeing most recently. And if you look at I'm working on it, hang on just a second. Okay. Well, there's gonna, hold it down, okay.
Hold it up a little higher.
Okay. Technical difficulties, please stand by.
All right, hang on.
Do you want to do this?
Yeah.
The former president of the University of Wyoming knows how to run technology,
Next
and
slide.
I don't. Next slide, please. Thank you. Woohoo! Wow. That's a fat lot of good that PhD did me. So here's the production side. That was not a very smooth transition, but the prices you've seen have been kind of floating down or diving down depending on the industry, and production has also been going down from rather significant peaks earlier. And so that's just another basic fact. I think we'll go next. Yeah, that's all right. Ah!
Stand by.
Our GDP has shrunk There we go. This is our Wyoming Business Cycle Index, and this shows the change from really the last peak, which is August of 2014 to August of 2016. And you can see that the numbers have been going down. And what this index shows you is unemployment, claims, jobs, national park visits, and several severance tax collections. So that shows you that. Let's just go ahead 2 slides. Yeah. Back one. There we are. We haven't practiced this, sorry. This is the peak industry contribution for mining and the GDP, the gross domestic product pie. It's a little hard to see, but that big orange thing there on your right, that's mining. And so in 2011, you can see that our GDP within the state was about $42 billion, and then about $15 billion of that came from the mining sectors. And then if you look at our most recent GDP number for last year, 2015, you can see that it's gone down. Both our GDP number has gone down from about $37 billion, and the contribution from mining has also gone down. So that is what it is. The next slide shows our labor market situation, and there is jobs as well for oil, gas, and CBM. And the employment situation, what we've seen over the past couple of months is that the unemployment rate has stopped rising, which is good. The number of jobs that were created in Wyoming last month were positive, which is also good. And so this shows kind of since the recession, since the big boom, the number of jobs went up pretty significantly, went down, but now it looks like maybe we're starting to even out. And really there is pretty good evidence that this is hopefully gonna stick. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Just to add a little bit of detail to this particular slide, what it is showing you, you can't see the metrics on it, but from the peak, most recent peak in energy prices and production to the current time, we've lost about 20,000 jobs in Wyoming. That's what that's the absolute number of what this graph is showing you. And if quickly looking at the next couple, you'll see that about half of them come out of the energy industry, and half of them are from industries, peripheral industries, from machine manufacturing for the oil fields to restaurants and that sort of thing. So well, that's just a little bit of perspective on this.
Yeah. So the next slide shows oil, gas, CBM, and oil price predictions from the Wall Street Journal. And you can see again, those are just, most of the time when I'm talking, just think sad, 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 we're sorry. But this is from the most recent Wyoming Insight from the Economic Analysis Division, and it shows the drop in oil jobs, oil rigs, and production.
Another just observation about this graph also is that what it's showing you is that peak employment in the oil and gas sector, this is not counting coal, but oil and gas sector was roughly 19,000 at the peak, and now it's about half that. So half of the $20,000 job loss figure is accounted for just by oil and gas.
The coal industry has, on average in Wyoming, about 65 to 77,000 jobs. Wendy, you can check me on that. It's dropped over the past several months, though. This is our labor force number, and again, you can see, as Dick was pointing out, we've had a significant shift, a significant drop in our labor force, but again, over the past couple of months, that's bottomed out, if you will. So it's not dropping, at least in the past couple of months. Let's see. This shows, let's go back to one more, if we can. There we go. So this is the Wyoming employment change from September 2016, from September 2014 to 2016. And there's that big hallmark headline number right there. The total number of jobs that were lost just in the past 2 years, it's 11,800. I'm sorry, I can't see. 11,800 added up over the past 2 years. And you can see that the vast majority of those have been concentrated in the mining sector, but also, as Dick pointed out, in ancillary sectors that depend on that. I remember going around the state with Bill on Tour 23 a couple years ago, and I remember talking to a young man who was our server at Applebee's, and he was a coal miner, and he was doing that to supplement his income. That's what we're talking about, other people losing jobs in other places because of this. Let's go to, that's all right. Income also has been eroding over the past couple of years. We'll show it in just a sec. And you can see that, again, very strong gains over the past several years with the boom. It kind of leveled out a little bit, and now it's gone negative. Severance tax collections are very far behind where they were last year, and last year they were very far behind where they were the year before. That's basically what that slide says. Revenue sources, again, there's severance tax revenues, but there's also investment income. We all know that the treasurer has been investing very wisely in bringing in extra money for the state. That's been very useful over the past several years. But there you go. The baseline source for our income has been and continues to be severance taxes.
Yep. Another quick observation here. The red line that you see is quarter by quarter severance taxes. Those are taxes levied on energy production in the state. That's total severance taxes collected by the state quarter to quarter going back to 2012. The numbers to keep in mind on this graph are, again, this is the red line. The highest month was approximately $275 million, and that was in, appears to be third quarter of 14. And now the monthly severance tax collection by the state is 60% less than that. If you connect that fact to the governor's mentioning this morning that the state derives 70% of its revenue each year, directly or indirectly, from the energy industry, that is a big, big problem, and it's a big, big challenge. And last observation about this, if you follow OPEC at all, you will have noticed that I think it was a couple of days ago, OPEC announced that it did not anticipate oil prices being above $60 a barrel at least through 2020. So waiting for the cycle to turn is not really, well, waiting is not a plan, and it's certainly not a plan that is likely to work for the state. And so next is,
Oh, okay. So don't shoot the messenger. We're going to turn it over to somebody with hopefully a happier story.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Economists, many of them, can make things that are really conceptually not that difficult to grasp complicated. Ann is not one of those. We're very lucky to have her. So next, though, I'd like to introduce Jim Neiman, who is the CEO and overall leader of Neiman Enterprises Incorporated. He'll tell you a little bit about that. But the reason that Jim is here and the takeaway that I'd like you to see in what he has to say is that his company, which, as I said a few minutes ago, has been around, family business, been around for 80 years. It lives in a commodity market with cycles that are at least as extreme and severe as our energy prices. And Jim will talk about that.
Thank you, Dick. Appreciate very much. Mr. Schilling, thank you too, and all of the members of this council that put this together, and of course the governor, and recognize the importance of this. It's a very key part. So first, to talk a little bit about what Dick related to in our family business. I'm the third generation in our family business. been around 80 years. My dad started when he was 6 years old in 1936 when my granddad started the first sawmill. So my commitment to my dad was to take our company business in some form and the family ranch 2 more generations. So we're now, and right now my son, who just used to work for the governor and was a commander of a group in Afghanistan, got back in June and now back with the family business. So unless the governor decides to steal him again here pretty soon, hopefully he'll start training to move ahead. So Dick, with that said, if you would. So when I look at when I break down the 80 years that I talked about, it was a real struggle from 36, our next 50 years, my granddad and my dad, what they went through. I was fortunate to graduate in 1974 from the University of Wyoming and come back and join the family business, and we had our first big disruption right off the bat. So since then, we've, in 97, 08, and 012, have acquired 3 sawmills. The one sawmill was a Fortune 500 company. Pope and Talbot started 1849, and we acquired part of those assets that we split up with the Canadian acquisition. It was very interesting. We got a pellet mill with that, and when we experienced all the shutdowns that I'll talk about a little bit later on the West Coast, the Spotted Owl, my dad said, you need to help build a golf course to help diversify our community and help get an airport here. He had no vision of what the challenge was. So anyway, that was a tough challenge. Dick, if you could move to the next slide. So now to focus on what, you've got it, let's see. There you go, got it. So just to focus a little bit on what we go through, this is the Random Lengths Lumber Composite Price Index, and this is what, if you're following any lumber futures or anything, this is what a lot it's focused on. So when you look at this, I can point out, if you look at the low, kind of to the right of the chart, I have a pointer here, but I'm not gonna be able to point it with two screens up. That low point in lumber prices was at the end of the Great Recession in 08. That's when prices plummeted due to the drop in the housing from 2 million housing starts down to close to under 300,000 housing starts. The high, if you go to the middle of the chart a little bit to the left, you see that high peak? That was caused, and if you look down, that happens to be in the period, I won't point out which president, but in the 90s, when environmental regulations set in, there was 250 to 300 sawmills shut down throughout the United States. And particularly on the West Coast and through Montana, we lost 3 in the Black Hills, lost all but 2 in Wyoming. There used to be 7. And Colorado had 11 in the 80s, and we're down to 1, which we own it now, revitalized it. When you shut down that many mills and cut the production off of federal lands from 11 billion board feet, keep in mind the growth is 22 billion on federal lands, you take it from 12 billion a cut to 1 in that period, the mills go broke. So it's very critical to make sure that you have a supply. So managing through these kind of prices, you know, you're looking at 200 and some % fluctuation from the low up to the high. So it's dramatic. One thing that also affects those charts, I can almost pinpoint, besides the drop in housing market and or a recession, the other big factor is our strong dollar. When our dollar gets strong, we anticipate, and when we look at charts, I study our dollar value and its relationship with the Canadian dollar and the euro. When it drops, when our dollar gets really strong, we know what's gonna happen, and pretty soon here comes the imports. Very, very similar to coal and oil and gas. It's almost identical, the same effects. I can see it on all commodities, less chance to export and a lot of imports start coming in. So if we could you jump to the next slide? So now, Dick has asked me to just talk a little bit. How did a family business like this survive with all the casualties nationwide, and how did we do it? And there's a number of reasons, and I put a lot of thought into this. And of course, to survive, you have to have a constitution that makes you, so resources, number one. You have to, a sawmill centered around the resource, and you have to find out where that resource is, and that's where you're going to find the location. You're going to put your mill, and usually it's going to be in a small community, which then compounds sometimes some labor issues. But I spend about 25+% of my time working on the supply side, on the political side, to make sure we got a supply. Thank God we've had people like Cynthia and Barrasso and Enzi in there, and I can go back clear to Dick Cheney helping us and a number of ones. And our governor has been so darn supportive, and so are the other states that helped us. So I'm going to jump to the other end of the spectrum from the wood supply, which is so critical to have, and have enough volume under contract, to the customer. We had some real core values that we seen and watched other companies that chased the dollars and chased particularly the big corporate giants, chased that quarterly report, or the next 6 months or the next year. We looked at it different. So we focused on our customers, and to make sure we reached out and found customers that would stick with us during recessions and not drop us over a few dollars if we were willing to provide a service to them at a lesser price in the really good times. So we found out if you focus on the housing, you're going to be a catastrophe at the housing. We focused on the cash and carry market, the over-the-shoulder trade, or some call it repair and remodel. And then we really focused on value added. How could we add value to our products? Knotty pine paneling, how could we pre-stain it? How could we enjoin it? And how could we add value to our byproducts? And stay a little bit away. So we only have one mill, a Colorado mill, that's focused on housing. And that's coming along really well. And just a side note, a Colorado mill is making 2 studs a second. It takes about 3 to 3.5 minutes to make enough studs to make a house at that operation. It's kind of amazing. It is at 120 boards going through a minute, it's kind of pretty to see. Out of dead Engelmann spruce. So team, here's a really key part that I want to relate. I was blessed and fortunate to find a Christian man that was one of the best leaders in the country 21 years ago. Tom Schaefer, put him in charge as our general manager. It's like finding a president of a university that is really going to put their own team together. I've experienced and watched that, and that's pretty special. Tom helped pull that team together, and now keeps bringing the team together so I can focus on other areas. Just a snapshot on employees. This is very important. When I got out of school, we had 25 employees. Today we have right under 500 to stay under the SBA cap. I want you to know we're still a small business. We have 480 directly related to us, but independent contractors providing wood to us and are hauling material out. And then there's offshoots of another 500 employees, particle board plant, bark plants, and wholesale and other remanufacturers. So there's 1,500 jobs tied to our 4 sawmills. So it's important from our end. Part of my success that actually goes back to the SBA, we had an opportunity to talk to, they helped put an external advisory team together for us. And that has been helpful. Now we have both an internal and external advisory team. One other key thing, talking about our employees, and I would like to suggest this to the state. Our company, in one of the toughest industries there is, has give 1 or 2 raises a year for 30 years. It might be as small as 0.5% or 1%, but we give a raise every year and try to at least keep up with inflation. If we can, over a 5-year period, we blend that and make sure we exceed the inflation rate. If you want to build good teams and keep good teams in this competitive world, particularly in Wyoming, you better damn well take care of your employees, and that goes down to the cleaning lady, or you're going to lose them. It's really, really important. Thank you. Planning. I'm so appreciative of the governor's discussion on the 20-year plan, because part of my strategy, you heard me talk about planning out over the next a few years after 80 years in business. We constantly talk about what's our 5-year, our 10-year, our 25, and our 50-year plan. It's hard to project out, but if you don't look out ahead, and I'm just so pleased the governor's doing that. Right now, we're looking at where's our next acquisition going to be for a sawmill. It's going to be, there's none in Arizona, none in New Mexico. The Mexican spotted owl put them all out of business. Is there some in Oregon I can look at? What can we do? My son wants to take us vertically. How can we add value and go up? So we're strategically talking about that. One of the key things for our success, and this is risky, and this is hard to get banks to help out, but usually the opportunities when you're going to expand is when in a recession and somebody went broke and you can pick them up. That's been part of our success. We try to do our expansions in the high-tech world during the low times. That means you got to plan and you got to have the money to take care of it. So talk about operations for a second. And of course, our strategy is to run lean and mean. When we bought the Fortune 500 company out, we knocked 2 complete layers of management out. This was painful to the community, but we took 8 people out. It was $1.2 million. We shrunk down the management, put our efforts onto the people that had boots on the ground, and put our money there. And we turned a company that was losing $1 million a month around to making money with a few changes, 50 less employees, and got it off and making money. That was critical. I really have enjoyed, since the 80s, following the Deming approach. I've known a bunch of different offshoots, and lean and mean is one of the offshoots of the Deming approach, and total quality management has helped us, and we created our own version to do that. And we deal with that both with our 2 key customers, Anderson Window and Pella Window. So with that said, financing is very critical. When you're going to do this management in the middle of a recession, then you better damn well have a bunch of cash available. And we've had to, over the last few years, figure out how to build a reserve and the ability to borrow from a bank to do that. So from there, I still look at it and wonder, how did we make it? And I really attribute a lot of it, my faith, I think, is really, really important. And a lot of people don't like to talk about this, but this is really, really important from my end to know that if you have a foundation of faith in your personal life and in your business, and this goes back to integrity, it's so important. And that's why, Sparky, I just love what you're doing. I would give her a hand again. So isn't it kind of ironic that my boss 2,000 years ago was a Jewish carpenter? Another key person in my life was Mick McMurray, and what he did was help teach me how to give back. We was trying to do it, but he was a very key instrumental person. And what I found by when you give, what opportunities that come in front of you by you helping someone first can really come back many-fold, and it's very important. So just a couple quick things, and I know I'm way past my time here, Dick, I apologize. I want to tell a quick story, and I think it comes a little bit back to my faith. right after the Great Recession, we had accumulated 22 million board feet. That's for us, we just made an acquisition at Spearfish, a $20 million acquisition. Lumber inventories built up. We were one of the few mills running 2 shifts. We was laying off a week every 2 or 3 months. Everybody else went down to 1 shift. You don't do that in Hulett, Wyoming, you lose the crew. The earthquake in Chile wiped out 11 sawmills and a particle board plant. There was hundreds of millions of board feet in containers to come up to America and Mexico. That was in the spring of, I think, 09, 010. And all that went into the ocean. In 48 hours, the 22 million board feet of lumber was sold, and we were sold out 2 months. We probably made about $5 million off of 1 earthquake in Chile. Now, you know, is that good luck, or what is it? Or is that divine intervention? You can make your own decisions there. Now, a little humor. My dad run away from home to 4 days of high school, and Granddad drug me back when a guy broke his arm in the mill. My dad's advice was, when everybody's going north, you go south. When everybody's going south, go north. And you know, part of the time he's right. The other thing, plug your ears, bankers. Dad says, go get the banker's advice and do the opposite. They'll only loan you money when cattle prices are high. Okay, now, let's switch to the next slide, Dick. So I'm gonna focus, I would hope, I'm gonna focus first. One of the most important things I think we can focus on in this state, and it can be value added, it can be natural resource based, but manufacturing if we could target and have manufacturing in almost every community, there's nothing better in a community to have part of that economy to be manufacturing. It's critical. It's new money, just like oil and gas is. It's not old money that come in on one car and goes out on another. It can turn from 3 to 7 times in a community. It's core that we continue to focus on manufacturing and now value added. And taxes is another key part here. And I know we're in tough times, and you guys got one heck of a tough schedule in front of you. But for gosh sakes, don't be adding taxes that you just encourage companies to move to Wyoming from Colorado and change the tax structure that enticed them here. We've got overall a fairly good tax structure, but I can tell you where I sat next to South Dakota. South Dakota has a much better tax structure for manufacturing than Wyoming does. And look at what they're doing for growth in guns and bullets and other types of manufacturers that are the core types of manufacturing that we can do. I'm so tickled to have a chance to tour companies that you've brought in, like Hi-Vis down at Laramie, and what they're doing. That's just amazing. So there's some really good things. When I look at the state, I don't know quite how to implement it, but the state, I'm really so pleased that Bill has brought up the Deming approach and the Deming scholars here. How do we implement the Deming approach into federal government to get lean and mean and have quality control and figure out how we're going to get the top quality people in to run this state? That is so critical. With all that said, I can only end with two last things. I have found, as most of you have heard, the harder I work, the luckier I get, and go Pokes.
Thank you, Jim. Again, there you have seen a single business that's been in existence for almost a century that lives in a commodity price cycle that is more severe even than the one in which this whole state lives and depends upon. So, lesson, it can be done. You can figure out how to do it, and you have to be entrepreneurial, and we'll come back to that theme. But this is a company that looks very hard about what it does, what it's doing that works, and what it's doing that doesn't work, and they stop doing what doesn't work. That takes planning and management, just as Jim said. So but just a summary, and as I say, we'll have Q&A, and I'm sure he'll be happy to talk more about how he really does it, which is really an art. Next up, I'd like to have Kevin Kershisnik come up. We're homeboys together in Fremont County. And Kevin, actually an interesting part of this panel is that really every person on it has business experience, government experience, and I'm going to say entrepreneurial experience in terms of basically starting a company or taking one and building it to something much more. Kevin has done those things too. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I don't have many PowerPoint slides, so I'm going to do a little anecdotal stories for you. But first, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity. I'm humbled and honored to be here. I agree with what Jim said. My business, actually I had 2 businesses in Riverton. They're both manufacturing, so I agree. Promote manufacturing. I'd like to take you back till 2008. We are a manufacturer of banking products for the financial sector. We all know what happened there. The financial sector crashed. First notice I got was from my main customer. It said 40% of your revenue's gone overnight. Next one I got was that 30% of the revenue is gone. So 70% of our revenue is gone. We looked at each other at the board meeting and said, now what? We could pack up, we could cash out. We said, no, we're gonna stick to it. We're gonna make this work. So while it's very difficult, it's very rewarding when you do make the change to shift things. We're back to profitability for the last 2 years, but the model has changed fundamentally. It's gone from a hierarchical manufacturing where you had a CEO, went all the way down through the ranks, and then that's how the commands came. That's what happened in the company. Not today. It's entrepreneurial, it's collaborative, it's 24/7. And that's the environment we're in, and that's how we have to go to survive. So that's the business side. I know Jim covered that, so I won't go into that anymore. What I'd like to talk about today is a little bit on economic development. I've been on the IDEA Inc. board. IDEA Inc. is the economic development entity for the city of Riverton for the last 10 years. We've been able to do some interesting things, and I think great things in the city of Riverton and Fremont County. 2 years ago, when Phil Christopherson went up to Gillette to help out Gillette with economic development, I filled in temporarily on a part-time basis to do some things. And so the history of IDEA Inc., take you back to 1983-ish. I wasn't there, but this is what happened. So in Fremont County, the uranium industry crashed, and so did the iron ore, which are 2 of the key industries in that area at that time. So Jeffrey City, who knows of Jeffrey City? Anybody? Okay, so a fair amount of you. So in a short period of time, within probably a year, that went from several thousand people, their population was reduced 95%. And it's a decimated town, almost a ghost town as you pass through it. So the folks in Riverton had said, we want to do something different. So Alan Moore and his team stepped up and said, okay, we are going to do something better to help the community. When you're in a recession, that's a pretty difficult time to do that. You're somewhat painted in the corner, but you have to come up with options. So they did. They found some funding, and they went to help businesses. So today, the workforce is back. And if you look at just a real quick measure, the sales and use tax for, I'm going to compare fiscal 14-15 to fiscal 15-16. In Fremont County, it's gone down 18%. In some other counties, Campbell County, Converse, it's as much as 50. So we've got a little more diversification. By no means can I say we're a diversified county, because we got a long way to go, but we're starting to go down that path. And there's some fundamental building blocks I think are critical to make this happen. Okay, slides up there, great. And so the first thing, and this was actually developed by the Wyoming Business Council and the Wyoming Economic Development Association. Again, there's a lot of talk going on where this should be more three-dimensional. There's a lot more things going, but for my Fisher-Price mind, I like to put it up here like this. So the bottom is the government, legislative body, elected officials, chambers of commerce, et cetera. And as I used to tell my daughter, if you want to build the biggest tower in school, you got to get a huge foundation. That's important. And I believe in the U.S. and in Wyoming and our local communities, we do have that. We have supportive, knowledgeable intelligent elected officials that help us for economic development. Now, I'll leave the details of that to Tony when he gets up here, so I'll move on to the next. The other 3 items there is quality of life. We've talked a lot about that, what's going on in Wyoming, why we love this great state. And for those of you that haven't gone there, again, talked about it this morning for the tourism. If you go to, I don't care if you pull out your cell phone and do it right now, that's fine, www.travelwyoming.com. Ann Shelburne and her team have done an excellent job, and that's what I use for recruiting. I show those videos, I'm like, man, I'd love to live there. I do. This is great. And so, like my father used to tell me, he said, if you want to live in Wyoming, he said, you're going to have to eat green mountains and drink blue skies. And, he was right in a lot of ways. And so, bravo to all of you that have found a way to make a living in this wonderful state. And I believe quality of life is second to none here. So the next one I want to talk about is the next building block is a workforce. And there's quite a few things there. Like I said, the fundamental shift from manufacturing to entrepreneur. So the job creation is different. There's still some coming from the universities, but a lot of them are entrepreneurs that say in the evening, I've done this, I want to try this product, I want to try this service. They're being created. You don't see as many spin-offs from the large businesses. So we need to be able to provide information to them. And the entrepreneurial, again, that could be a full day session on that. But there's a lot of things that we could do. One thing I do want to talk about is the governor's plan, again, that he talked about this morning is an excellent thing. There's also, how many are familiar with WIOA? Okay, all right, so this is Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's from the Department of Labor. And they put together new standards, and they're realizing that the way workers are trained today has changed. It's fundamentally different. We need more apprenticeships. We need more internships. We need to be able to have these certifications. So they're allowing the states to really go in whichever direction they want. And so the governor has put forth a plan with the help of the Department of Workforce Services. It's 288 pages, so it's a quite lengthy document. But it shows and outlines some of the things that the state can do. So on the Workforce Development Council, we've said, all right, how can we take the information from the top level plans and get the grassroots efforts from all of us here that are working hard in our communities and make it successful? So what we're doing is we are creating, actually the Community College Commission has these groups formed. They're called Workforce Advisory Groups. And it's going to be comprised of Department of Labor, Department of Education, Economic Development, private businesses, and local stakeholders. So for those of you that are interested in your community and wanting to make a difference, it's a great opportunity to do so. I'd recommend that you go to your local workforce center and tell them you're interested in that. The council is forming these committees now, and we hope to have the grassroots effort, and the Workforce Development Council will be the conduit to the top level plan. So those are some of the things that are happening at that level. For those of you that are business owners, there's also a lot of great plans out there. There's grant monies available to train your workers. If you have a new worker, you can get a workforce training grant. If they're a new worker, a new position, up to 100%, $4,000, max of $4,000. If it's an existing employee, it can be 60% covered as in grant. You'd cover 40%, up to $2,000. There's pre-hire grants if you have a program going on. So there's a lot of good things. And what I'm seeing over and over, again, coming from the private sector and seeing the public sector as well, is that collaboration is critical. It's going to require everybody in this room to make that difference, to move our state forward like we're starting to do. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about the infrastructure. So all communities need land, buildings, utilities. Talked a little bit about broadband before. That's absolutely critical. It's the conduit for business success today, similar to, if you go way back, the waterways used to be, highways were for transportation, et cetera. It's bits and bytes that are going back and forth that are how we communicate and how we do business today. So on the infrastructure, I'd like to give you two examples. One, Idea Inc. Wanted to expand and get the diversification. So a couple things we did is we used the BRC, which is a Business Ready Community Grant from the Wyoming Business Council, which is an excellent program. We were able to go out and to buy existing buildings or build new buildings for customers or for businesses in our area or to recruit businesses. And Again, on this graph here, you're going to see those three are the foundation. You have to have those before you can really start doing business retention expansion, which is a great program from the Business Council, entrepreneurial development, or for recruiting new businesses. So what we did is we were able to take that money, matter of fact, it's your money, taxpayer monies, so thank you. And we took that, we ended up buying these buildings, and now we have retained businesses in our community, and we're starting to see the velocity on that money. So the initial investment was there, we've recouped that money, and we're starting to use it for other investments in our community. Again, all this was not possible without the Business Council and Roger Bauer and Sean Reese and their team. Just did an excellent job making this happen. But we've been able to take the monies and then use them to fund other projects, infrastructure. So we're helping out with the roads committee to make sure that they got the tax renewed so our infrastructure can be improved. Working on air service. A lot of us have issues with critical air service in the state. So we're supporting that initiative as well. And the big one that we did in Fremont County was there's state lands. And if you look at the city of Riverton, it's landlocked. There's state, federal, and reservation lands all the way around it. Minimal directions for the city to grow. So there were some legislative initiatives that went through and passed that allowed surplus state lands to be nominated to be sold for highest and best use. So we actually went through that process for the last 3 years. And what we did was we nominated some direct Department of Correction lands, and we were able to go through the process. Won't belabor you with all the details, but basically it took 33 months, cost us about $250,000, and the land is now in private hands with development. Our local economic development group just had a presentation from the developers of what it's going to look like, and it looks great. Very excited. So those are the things that we can do, and I just really think the IDEA economic development model is a positive one. The IDEA board is all volunteer. It's a bunch of volunteer local business men and women that donate their time to improve the community. And so those are really the building blocks. And again, each community is a little bit different, but we have all similar needs. And I think getting those building blocks, put them in place, then you can go to the next level, which is the existing business. So for those of you who don't know, the Business Council has a BRE, a Business Retention Expansion Program, where we go out and interview our local businesses and say, what do you need? What's preventing you from growing? How can we help, basically? And there's common threads with that, and so we hope to take that data and be able to provide these services to these common businesses. So that's a great thing. The entrepreneurial development, again, that's the way things are going. Back to the company that we own, that's how we're going to be successful. We're talking about the mobile sensors and using various components and devices like that you saw a little bit today. And we're doing that in Wyoming, and that's where the future is. And then I guess the last thing is, recruiting the business. With a lot of time spent there, but you have to have these other building blocks in place. So again, to take anything away from the presentation, it's these key building blocks. Make sure that the quality of life, the workforce development, your infrastructure is in your community and going strong. And there's a ton of excellent economic developers out in this audience that are doing just that in your communities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. As you can see, there's a theme in this. It's entrepreneurship and collaboration with government, whether elected officials or agencies, as Kevin is head of one. I'd now like to introduce Betsy Markey, who is another successful entrepreneur at one time in her career, has held national elective office, and is regional director for the Small Business Administration, which is obviously an organization that quite a few of us know quite a bit about. So, Betsy, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. I don't have slides, so I'm not going to need your assistance, so I'll just sit down and relax. Again, I'm Betsy Markey, the Regional Administrator for the Small Business Administration. I cover 6 beautiful states in the West: Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, Utah, and North and South Dakota. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the experiences that I've seen of what states have done. But let's go back, 30, 35 years. We all have the boom and bust cycles with oil and gas. We've all experienced that. them. Back in the mid-1980s, there was a young geologist working in the western slope of Colorado who lost his job. He was working in the oil industry. So he decided, like, well, what am I going to do next? He used to make pretty good beer in his basement. So I thought, well, maybe I can make a business out of that. So he actually went to the Small Business Administration, got a loan to purchase equipment and a facility, and started brewing beer, which became Wine Coop Brewery, which he sold, back in the 1990s when he ran for mayor of Denver, and now is our governor of Colorado, Governor Hickenlooper. So you never know how things are going to start, but those SBA loans are very important. But I want to talk about a couple of other things that I've seen in other communities where they have been successful, particularly in times of adversity, and figuring out how are we going to diversify. And I think what I've seen in every case is that communities who are leveraging the strengths they already have, and I've heard this discussed here in Wyoming, but leveraging what is already good in your community, in your state. As an example, with the University of Colorado for many years has had a very strong aerospace program. The teaching hospital at the University of Colorado is very strong, and officials and chambers, economic development folks have been able to use those programs to get other companies who are going to benefit not only from quality of life, but the students who are now qualified to fill those positions. And so I know now in the Denver area is a real hub for both the aerospace industry and the biotech industry as well. The National Renewable Energy Lab is located in Golden, Colorado, and Colorado's been able to use that facility to, and some other things that they've done with renewable energy to attract renewable energy companies to the state. And actually, the renewable energy industry employs roughly the same number of people now than the oil and gas industry today. So it's really changed the dynamic of who the employers are in the state. Just recently, I was in Colorado Springs meeting with the mayor there, and there are 4 military installations in Colorado Springs, and a lot of retired military who have lots of expertise. But one of the new and emerging industries, at least in that area, again, it's based on leveraging the strengths in that area with the military, is cybersecurity. And there are now nearly 100 companies just in the Colorado Springs area that are devoted to the cybersecurity industry. One other example I want to mention is Utah. Utah, and I was surprised about this, they are nearly one of the largest, in terms of states, one of the largest exporters in the country as a state. Some people have said, they've got a large Mormon population. They go on missions, they have established international contracts, but regardless, they have a huge number of exports. In fact, most of their exports are in the mineral industry, and realizing the fact that 96% of your customers are going to be outside of the United States. So they have really, I think over the past decade, done a very good job of leveraging that. They've got commodities that other countries want. They've established those contacts overseas, and they've utilized the Small Business Administration. You may not know, but we have work very closely with U.S. Trade Representative. We have export assistance specialists who will help a company. Maybe you want to get to the next level and start exporting your products overseas. We will help you structure those deals, work through what are the tariffs in those particular countries, and actually our loan programs will guarantee 90% of that loan. If you are a small business and want to start getting into the export business, will guarantee 90% of that loan. So that's huge. We also have, and I know Wyoming received some STEP grants this past year, and that stands for State Trade and Export Promotion. With your small business, and maybe you want to go to a trade show in Germany to show your wares, but you really can't afford to get over there and pay the cost of travel. and the fees for entrance. You can apply to the Small Business Administration. You can get a grant to do that. So there's a lot of resources out there. I want to touch just a little bit more about the SBA. Amy Lee is here. She is the district director for the SBA for the state of Wyoming. She is located in Casper and does a great job in making sure she's connecting young entrepreneurs, existing businesses with access to capital. The SBA, we don't make the loans ourselves. We're working in the background. The banks make the loans, but the bank may suggest that if you've been turned down for a commercial loan, you're a small business, you may want to look at an SBA-backed loan, where we're guaranteeing anywhere between 60 and 90% of that loan is guaranteed by the federal government. It's great for the small business owner because maybe they've been denied a loan in the past. It's good for the banks because we're taking away quite a bit of the risk from them as well. And it's pretty good for the taxpayer. Over the last couple of years, the fees that we charge on our loans have more than paid for themselves. And so we're actually turning money back into the Treasury. Not very many government programs can say that. And so it's really a really good deal for the small business owner to get up and going. We also have a network of small business development centers. There's one in Cheyenne, there's one in Casper. I think there's 10 around the state where I've used them myself as a small business owner that will give you advice on your business plan, again, on exporting, on using social media to expand your business. So a lot of good resources right here in the state of Wyoming for small business owners. I want to just give a plug because Thanksgiving, the Saturday after Thanksgiving is Shop Small Business Saturday. So we always want to make sure that we're encouraging people to shop local. We just recently held a webinar. We're a small agency, so we have a lot of public-private partnerships. Again, we work with our banks. They make the loans. We work with a high-tech community like Google and Amazon and Microsoft who provide free webinars through the Small Business Administration to companies. The last one we did was marketed to Main Street companies, and the focus was how do you find your customers during the holiday season. So I think it's particularly important to make sure that we are promoting our small businesses in our downtowns. They're the ones who are the community, ones who are involved in the community. They're not only the small business owners, they're the mothers and fathers and teachers and soccer coaches. So we want to make sure and the job creators, because 2 out of every 3 job in this country is coming from a small business owner. I just want to touch on the fact that about 30 years ago, my husband and I started our own small business. We were living in Maryland. We both quit our jobs, got a contract with MCI, and we were marketing their new technology called electronic mail. And it went really well. We then started branching out into website development, content management software. Company was going very well, but we had 3 small children at home, and my husband and I started talking that we don't want to raise our children here. We want to go to a smaller community. So what was more important to us, and I know this is the case with so many small business owners, it's great to make a profit and grow and create jobs, but quality of life for you and your family is really the most important thing. So we looked all around the country on where to move. I have some family in Colorado, and we decided to go to Fort Collins, Colorado. It was a small community. 25 years ago, it was a lot smaller than it is now. It would have been too big by today's standards if we were doing it today. But we were looking for some place where the schools were good, where we knew our neighbors, where my kids could ride their bikes to their friends' houses, and we would be absolutely fine with that. And that's where we decided to go. But the overriding, most important thing that had to be there before we were going to move our family was broadband access. I mean, that was critical. We were in a high-tech company. We had to have good high-speed internet access. And you've already done that here. And that is so fundamentally important for a state. I talk to elected officials in eastern Montana and eastern Colorado who say, gosh, if we only had good internet access, we could attract more businesses here. And I say, well, you ought to look and see what Wyoming has already done, because they're there. So it's almost almost like Jack said this morning, I mean, you're right at that spot where there is exponential growth possible, and I think a lot of that is because of the foresight that the governor and others have had to make sure that there is good broadband wherever you are here in Wyoming. I met a couple of months ago with a cloud data storage company in Cheyenne, which is a great industry and has all the right ingredients here in Cheyenne to do that because of the investments that you've made. The last thing I want to touch on is we've talked a little bit about millennials and the out-migration of students out of the state, and just a couple things I want to say as a mother of 3 millennials myself. I am so excited about the future because of our young people, and I think that they are just incredible, but certainly different than certainly my generation. They want a lot of flexibility. For one thing, they want to be able to take off Fridays and work at home, or go fishing, or go water skiing, go to the mountains. But they work really hard. I mean, my daughter will, take off work on a Friday or a Tuesday to do something, but by golly, on Sunday night, she's watching Game of Thrones, and she's on her computer, and she's working. I mean, she just this particular one does digital marketing, so she can work anywhere. They work very, very hard, but they want that flexibility. Also, community is so important, I think, to this generation, and working for a company that gives back to their community, and they want that. They're looking for that, and you have that here already. Recreational opportunities. I mean, I see young people working hard, but certainly wanting to play hard as well. So I think someone mentioned earlier about the recreation industry here. You have all the right ingredients for that right now. My husband and I have a small place in eastern Colorado. A lot of people in Colorado like to go to the mountains, but I think they're too crowded. We really like the eastern part of the state because there's lots of reservoirs and there's water sports. Our kids fight over using that place right now on the weekends because they want to be able to recreate. So what I've heard today and this morning from the various speakers is that Wyoming is really poised for some really interesting things that can happen in the future because you've got all the right ingredients, a good sense of community, a lot of beautiful open space, which people want, and again, great broadband access. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen here in the next decade. The last thing I want to touch on, there's always lots of good ideas. Everyone has lots of good ideas. That's the easy part. The most difficult part is finding those people who are going to be able to execute those ideas. And those are your community champions. And as I travel to small communities around the West, I think, sometimes some of these communities, they may dry up and go away, but there's others where it might be a small business owner, an entrepreneur who's just moved there, somebody who has come back to that community to raise their family, and they want to make change. So I think the important thing is recognizing who those community champions are, supporting them in every way possible. I was just recently in Butte, Montana. There was a wonderful young couple who they grew up there, and they found a way to come back to Butte because they wanted to raise their kids the same way that they were raised. They got an SBA loan to start a distillery, and they give back to the community in so many different ways. I think that is the wave of the future. I think that's what young people want, and I think that's what you have right here in Wyoming. So best of luck to you all.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm going to ask Bill and Fred's indulgence for a few more minutes of time. We have with us now Senator Tony Ross, who, again, another government servant, an elected official, an entrepreneur in the sense that he runs his own law firm and has seen a lot of things over the course of his career. But something that Betsy was emphasizing is the importance, and Kevin too, the importance of government services, quality of life. And some of quality of life has to do with government services. our state government provides many good ones, but it is challenged on the revenue side and at the moment, and that's really why we're all here together, is to talk about how to deal with that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Senator Tony Ross. Again, 20 years in the legislature, currently chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and you may, by all means.
Oh, I gotta hold it, I'll go up.
Here, I can hold it.
Plan B.
Senator Ross approaches the podium.
Well, thank you, Dick, and thank you, Bill Schilling, and all the great people at the Wyoming Business Alliance. It's an honor to be here. I've been invited several times to speak. This is probably my last time to be the whipping boy since I'm retiring after almost 22 years in the legislature at the end of this year. I currently serve as the Senate Chairman of Appropriations, and I'm not really quite sure why I'm the last one supposed to build up to better and better news. Because I'm going to be factual with you, at least initially. Let me just say that we found ourselves, when President Nicholas asked me to be chairman of Appropriations after me being president of the Senate, I said yes. Well, we were in pretty good shape. And within a month's time of me accepting that appointment, we were in the tank, literally. And what that tells you is that we are a little fish in a really big sea. OPEC and Saudi Arabia and all of those that control some of our markets really sent us into a tailspin. So in the 2016 budget session, which is for this biennium now, which is the 17-18 budget, we're in it now. Our budget runs from June 31st to July 1st of each year. Unfortunately, we've now found ourselves that even after the budget session in 2016, that we are $148 million short for 2016. That has been made up by a long-time standing policy of keeping what we call a statutory reserve, which is about 5%, that is available to the governor when the legislature is not in session. That's $104.2 million. He utilized that along with what we had some reversions and so forth. So the net effect of that is that for 2016, there's still $8.2 million hole that needs to be filled. What does that mean for the 2017-18 budget? Our revenue forecast is down. As you may have heard or read the Craig report, we do everything based on projections. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. But more often than not, they've been pretty conservative. The net effect is that for 17-18 budget, we are in the hole $156 million, almost $157 million. Is there somebody trying to turn out the lights on me? It's okay.
Every time they cut off the mic, so keep going.
Okay, they didn't cut off the mic. Let me say that that in doing this job, you need to look long term, and you've heard that, but it's going to be a dramatic shift for the 1920 budget. Huge. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I've been talking to you about so far is on the general fund BRA, budget reserve account, which kind of does the general operations of state government. But you also have schools. It's $1.8 billion a biennium. And in order to balance the budget for 17-18, we're going to have to use about $568 million that is in our permanent land fund, or our permanent land fund holding account. $568 million is going to have to be swept back up into the school foundation program. That means there will be $0 in that holding account. So for the 1920 budget, you're looking at about $360 million a year shortfall for the 1920, about $720 million that we're gonna have to figure out for K through 12. It's a big deal. Now, on the good side, I told you I was gonna try to be somewhat positive here. I've been in the legislature a long time. Many of us have, Kermit Brown, Wayne Johnson, others that are here. I came in '95 when we were in a dire straits. I mean, we robbed every coffee can we could to balance the budget. Those of us that were in the legislature then said, we're not going to do that again. And that's when when things were good, we created the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. That, for the 2016 era, was at $1.8 billion. That money is now down to $1.5 billion because we used that money to help balance the budget, but we also used it for things like infrastructure. We used $104 million to go to cities, towns, and counties. And so that, what I want to say is that is one-time money, and it should be used wisely for infrastructure, things of that nature, and not for operations, in my opinion. We did our damnedest to try to balance the budget during the budget session, looking at existing revenues and expenditures and trying to make them match. Quite frankly, failed. We had to use $36 million out of the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account to balance the budget. And then the question for the next legislature and the legislature after that is, to what extent do you use that fund? Do you use it for operations and just hope that something else happens, or do you plan for the future? I suggest to you that our tax structure is a three-legged stool. I am not here to advocate for taxes, but I think everybody knows it. We depend on severance taxes and federal mineral royalties as one leg. The others is sales and use taxes is the other leg, and ad valorem taxes, property taxes, is the other leg. Is it a stable revenue situation? Maybe it's time to go back and look at tax 2000 and dust that off again. A lot of work went into that by Senator John Hines and others. I think that the politics of passing a tax when you have a Legislative Stabilization Reserve account is almost extremely difficult, if at all. And so that's the politics of that. But perhaps we need to be thinking long-term, because if this downturn goes for at least 10 years, we will have easily depleted the LSRA and probably more than spent that, and we're going to need to think about long-term, what will we do? So we're in better shape than we were in the 90s, but certainly that was from good planning, I think, and good conservative legislature in the state of Wyoming. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the later. Thank you.
In deference to the time and the schedule, I will entertain one question. You see the members of the panel. If you have questions you'd like to put to them after our session is over, feel free. I'll certainly be available. But who would like to be the questioner? I see a hand up.
I would like to ask Kevin why he didn't mention who the private parties are who purchased the prison farm land.
Well, no, that's fine. If you want, yeah. The reason I didn't mention anything at that point, we thought we were going to have 10 minutes. We only had 5. So we were cutting things out. But basically what happened for that land, was a professional developer out of Colorado and Idaho. Actually purchased the land on behalf of the Eastern Shoshone tribe. And they have plans to develop that land to go forward. And at least in Riverton, we feel that is a very great thing. It's going to raise the water level for all concerned in our community.
Thank you very much, Kevin. As I say, our time has been limited, so we're available for questions hereafter, but I will turn the podium back over to Fred.
Thank you, Dick. And for some very inspiring conversations, thank you very much to the panel. Pam Thayer is going to come up and introduce our next guests, some very inspiring speakers for the next hour that will be with us. Dr. Ann Alexander warned us that we were going to get some facts and figures, and certainly we heard that in the beginning and the end, but sometimes, as we know in business, it takes a burning platform to motivate us to take things to the next level. We heard wonderful opportunities, and I think we need to be able to take advantage of those, and it should be motivating to us, not demoralizing. Right now, Pam Thayer, please come up to the podium. And while she's doing that, something that's been troubling me all morning, if you can take a stretch in your area and show me how to do this hand lock thing. You know, I gotta get that thing figured out before I go home. You have it? Just a moment, please. And Pam is going to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks. Okay, so, excuse me?
Just wait one minute.
Funny?
I don't want to cut that.
No, and that's,
Bill had quite an introduction.
well, and I actually figured I'm going to be funny enough.
You can use it.
Yeah, that's what I thought, it'd be more fun.
I'm sorry I didn't introduce you, but on Main Street. It wasn't on the thing, and I was going to freak out.
Okay.
Would you like me to do that?
Hi, how are you? Good. I'll just sit beside Fred. Are you going to stay up here?
I guess I do.
Will you just tell me? Yeah, I just kind of made it fun. I figured if they needed an afternoon stretch. And
Well, it's nice of you to do that.
yeah, and then tomorrow when they're run morning session with Deb and
So I'll be
okay. Yeah, so we have 2 community people and Deb. So you tell me I'm ready.
okay. We'll just give another 2 more.
Do we want to just go ahead and bring them up so they're ready to go?